Anson Jew, welcome to Tech Talk with Daniel.
Thanks for having me.
I have to admit, I'm beyond thrilled to have an opportunity to speak with someone who has worked on two of my all-time favorite adventure games, The Dig and Loom.
All right.
And as much as I'm excited talking about the things you've worked on that made it into these games, I'm more excited to talk about the things that didn't make the final cut.
Uh-oh. Okay.
But before we get into all of that, let's start at the beginning. How did you get into art?
I've always been drawing, even as a little kid. It might be in my blood. My mother was an artist. She went to art school in Hong Kong, and I think because of that, me and my twin brother, who's also ends up being an artist, we had exposure to all of her art books. She had a lot of really good art books, and we poured through those, and we learned a lot. And me and my brothers were both kind of like to make stuff, so we made our own comic books. We made Super 8 movies that were animated. We made flip books and things like that. We just used to like to make things, tell our own stories, and that was just something we always did. Always fans of comic books and movies and TV shows. Just had a real taste for storytelling, and that was just always a part of part of my life. And so I went to school thinking, okay, well, I'll be an illustrator. And I went to the illustration. Backing up a little bit, I used to think, well, the only practical way I'm going to get to do art is to work in publications, something like journalism. So I worked in the school paper or the yearbook and stuff like that, wherever I would have a chance to do illustration. I actually ended up getting an AA degree in journalism at the city college, and then got a bachelor's degree in communication at Chico State. The communications program there had a illustration component, and I ended up transferring to that just to keep on doing the illustration part, because I found I was a horrible graphic designer, and I ended up working mostly in publication. Ended up working at a horse magazine once I got out of college, and I actually also worked at a newspaper for my internship when I was in college. But working in a newspaper in Sacramento, I found this guild, Northern California Artists Guild. And one of the guys there was about my age, and he was also doing cartoons. This was another artist. He was doing a series of T-shirts called Couch Surfing in Activewear, and this turned out to be Larry Ahern. And so he was my roommate for a number of years. And my brother, who right out of college got work as an illustrator at ILM, was already living in San Rafael and working. He went to school in the Bay Area there at the Academy of Art. And one of the other members of the guild that I was in, Martin Cameron, said, you know what, the company that I work for, LucasArts, is looking for young blood, new people, and you might be good for that. They said, okay, well, why don't you come over and show us your work? And that would be easy for me because my brother was working at ILM, which is just like right across the parking lot from LucasArts. So Larry heard about this, and he said, well, I want to interview too. And we both went down there. We both interviewed, and we ended up both getting work at Lucas. We went down there for the first month or so. We worked over at the ranch, kind of training in the animation program that they were going to use. And then I guess at the time they were probably putting together the art department in the A building in San Rafael. So we were working at the ranch out in the ranch out in the hills of LucasArts, of Lucasfilm, and then we came down to San Rafael to work in the now growing art department in San Rafael, and we just started working on the first project, which was Noah Falstein's The Dig. and we were just neither of us were gamers. You know, I'd played a few games, but neither of us knew anything about games. And but we thought it would be a fun job to do anyways. And so
wait, so LucasArts was your first paid job as an artist?
I was working at magazines doing paste ups, and I would get an occasional illustration gig. But as far as like full time, that was probably my first job. I was doing occasional freelance, but it wasn't nothing that could pay my bills.
And when did you start working there exactly?
1989. And so we were there, and we kind of, worked for like 9 months, kind of as a kind of a test, to see how things were going to go. And we worked out. They hired us on as permanent employees, both working on the dig. I was mostly doing animation. Larry was doing a lot of backgrounds, and it was really exciting for me because I got to see some artists who I was a fan of. Like I was working directly under Ken Macklin, who was I was already a big fan of his work, and I see him, and then Brent Anderson, who was also very familiar with his work. They're both working there, just kind of like, oh my God, it's just like these people I'm a fan of. They're just working on it. I'm sitting here working right next to them, and it was really exciting for me. Yeah, and so we just worked on Noah's Dig for a while, which was really exciting for me because it was just like this big project. I was seeing all this amazing artwork and people working on things and using computers to do art, which was a brand new thing for me. I remember first day going into a building and seeing Mike Ebert and Marco Ferrari doing these amazing things with deep paint and color cycling, just kind of whipping out artwork. So while we were working on the dig, we got to see a lot of the artwork that had been done already. Jim McLeod was one of the artists on it, and he had already done these amazing interiors and maybe some character designs that were like astronaut suits and things like that. But we went through a whole bunch of iterations of the costumes and what the interiors looked like, and it was just just like a lot of R&D, I guess you could call it. And that was all.
Were you part of the initial design meeting that was in the day of the San Francisco earthquake in 1989?
No, but that was I was still in 89, and that was shortly after that is when we came up. But we just kind of came in. The game had already been worked on quite a bit at this point. We had some great backgrounds that were painted by Ken Macklin and some others. We saw some early prototype artwork that was done by Terrell Whitlatch and by Ian McCaig. They were kind of influenced by John Carter of Mars. So you had these kind of six-limbed creatures and all these variations of things. And the idea was that you had that there was life on Earth, but everything was based on 6 limbs. And I thought it was a really cool idea that a lot of these machines depended on somebody having 6 limbs. And so you would have two characters that you have to play, and they would have to cooperate in order to get these machines to work. So there's some really cool concepts that went into the game. But unfortunately, we never really got to a point where we had any really solid puzzles. At least from the animation standpoint, I was doing a lot of like background characters and walk cycles and things like that. But we never got to a point where I was actually animating anything that was a real puzzle. It was just experimenting and designing characters. They wanted characters where you couldn't tell the difference between a plant and an animal. So I made this kind of 6-limbed cucumber creature. It looked like a bunch of cucumbers, but it was actually an animal. So That's just one of the interesting things that we did there. Oh, the first dig actually had a lot of interesting ideas, but I just never really, I think in terms of the story and puzzles, they didn't really get as developed. They were having trouble getting real puzzles and stuff, like or deciding exactly what they wanted to do with the game. But in the meantime, we're just kind of creating artwork. And that was what happened quite a bit.
And what was it like working with Noah Falstein on this project?
Well, it was a little bit frustrating that from an artist standpoint, because I didn't always have things that they told me that I had to do. You know, it was like at the time, it was like, okay, is this going to be a story game, or is this going to be a role playing game? They were trying to figure that out, and then they were, you know, they say, okay, well, I'll have a death, do a walk cycle and then do a death. Well, how do I do a death? What's happening in the story? And they really hadn't figured the story out much. So that became kind of difficult. So just, you know, I was just doing a lot of kind of R&D, creating characters, giving them a flying cycle. We tried different approaches to characters. We actually did some photography. I did we tried photographing a clay model. We went over to visit Richard Miller at ILM to show us how to do some plasticine animation. And I built a six-legged, kind of like a hippopotamus type creature. And I didn't really know how to sculpt. We went over to ILM to visit Richard Miller and gave us some tips. You know, use saran wrap and some toothpicks so that you can make wrinkles on things without getting a bunch of clumps of clay and stuff like that. And I built a six-legged model, and we
photograph it, transfer it to Deep-Paint Animator, and then just kind of manipulate the artwork and touch it up a little bit to try to make a walk cycle out of it. And we were trying all kinds of different, you know, R&D ideas. We actually had Sean Clark and Lucy Bradshaw actually did some tests where they got into some water skiing wetsuits. And they photographed them actually doing animation, walking up ramps, picking up things, walk cycles, and then trying to transfer those onto video to see if we could possibly do live action. And what they were finding is that video interprets form a much different way than a human would. So there was all kinds of, even though you could see the motion, if you're actually staring at something for a long time and it's interpreted by video, it doesn't really look like anything. You know, it has to be a drawing actually is much more clear than like a video scan of something. A video scan has all kinds of, you know, it interprets color in a much different way than a human mind does. And so if you're staring at something on a screen for a long time, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. If it's moving, you know, like you're watching a video, yeah, you can tell that it's a person walking. But when it's standing there and you're just being able to sit there and scrutinize it for a while, you can see that it really isn't working. So that was a test that didn't work too well. But we animated some characters. There was a creature called the Terrabat, which was like a six-limbed kind of flying character. So it had a couple of legs and a pair of wings, and it was supposed to basically be the terror of the show. It was just like always perched in a. There was a cylindrical type of building that it lived in, and some alien tree life in the middle of it, and it was basically like a tower that you would climb, and in one of it the Terrabat was the Terrabat's lair, and you just didn't want to end up there. So what else?
And at that point, when you worked on the first version of the dig, was the entire plot planned out, or were you just working on several segments of the game?
There's some rough ideas of stuff, but I didn't get the impression from my end anyways that all the details had been worked out. They knew that they knew there was a lot of cool stuff that they knew that they wanted to do, and they had the basic premise of Treasure of Sierra Madre meets Forbidden Planet, and they knew that the characters were going to turn against each other at some point, but a lot of the details of that never got filled out. So, as an animator, I need those details to say, okay, well, what are you going to make these characters do? You can't just say make a character die. You have to know, is this character dying in a fight? Is he getting its head bitten off by a pterobat? What's happening? And we never really got a lot of that we never got to the point where we got to do a lot of that. But we did have some, interesting backgrounds that we got to work on. We knew that there was like a lot of plant life, and so a lot of backgrounds that were structures that were made out of plant life. There was one scene. There was there was some artwork that showed a giant turtle. You can't tell that it's a turtle, or you weren't able to tell that it was a turtle at first. It's like a giant turtle, and you go into its body, and there's a whole bunch of puzzles that you have to figure out. But you don't know you're in a turtle's body until you get out of it. But that was as much as I knew about that. I knew I actually did a test paint of what the turtle would like based on a Ken Macklin sketch. I did a paint of that and of the exterior of it, and it's just like this turtle's been sitting there for years and years and years. It's got moss growing out of it, and it's got trees and different things growing out of it. But at some point you have to go inside of its mouth, do whatever it is, puzzles on the inside of it, and then you leave. But it's not always, it wasn't meant to be always clear that you knew that you were going inside of a living creature.
So you had a bunch of tasks without any context. Every day you'd get animate this, animate that.
There might have been stuff that I just didn't know about what they were doing on the other side of the why things were happening. There were some puzzles that dealt with water troughs and things like that, but I didn't really. I never got a sense that I knew what the point of any of these were. I didn't know where the story was going. I knew they had problems with getting the story nailed down. At one point, they actually hired Orson Scott Card to come in and kind of punch up the story, so that you could tell. Just there were a lot of cool elements to the story, but they needed to make it all make sense so that the ending would land a little harder. But that none of that ended up happening into the actual game. Those changes.
And when did you find out that Nos Dig was canceled?
This was, I think, this must have been 1990, 91 or something like that. We worked on it for maybe almost a year, or maybe a little more, roughly a year. And I was heartbroken because this is, it's now that I've been working in the entertainment industry for a number of years, I know that games that people start working on and get canceled, that's kind of pretty normal. But at that time, it was like I was heartbroken. It's like, oh, we did all this work and it's not going to happen. What's going on here? And at one point, me and Bill Eakin, another artist who was working on it, and Larry Aaron as well, suggested, well, we've got all this art. Can't we just take the artwork and make it and put a Star Wars property onto it and make it and make it into its own game? So it was like we suggested making a Boba Fett game. Now this is 1991, 1990, 91. Boba Fett wasn't as well known as he was now. So we went over and we had a little meeting, and at the time it was like, well, nobody knows who Boba Fett is. So why would we want to try to do that? So it was like, literally we know years later, Boba Fett would be a thing. But after working on the dig, it was kind of like, okay, we got scattered and moved on to other projects. I worked on Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis.
Wait, didn't you work on Loom before that?
That was actually after I worked on a. It was kind of a special edition of Loom. So Loom had like a special kind of up-resed version with a few extra scenes in
it.
Wait,
so when you started working on, after you started working on Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, then you got to join the Loom crew to work on the CD-ROM version of Loom?
No, well, Loom had already come out by the time I was hired. So there was a finished version of Loom. And so there, over time, I did actually a few upgrades for different projects. So I did an upgrade to Loom. So I just added some scenes. And I was basically the only person there. I just took the existing art and some of the characters, try to make them look a little bit better, add a few effects scenes. I did a scene where the bad guy kind of appears in space. So there's a big, hullabaloo, because we had better,
We'll see that in a moment.
Yeah, it had better technology. I also did another one for Zach McCracken. They did an upgrade of Zach McCracken, and I upgraded the look of the characters, in their spacesuits and stuff. So yeah, there were a few upgrades that I did in between, projects.
Okay, so let's talk about Fate of Atlantis, then we'll move on to Loom. When did you join the Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis project?
Yeah, that was probably pretty much the right after the dig ended. So the dig was just kind of finishing up. So they were on the tail end of it. So I came on there and I did animation scenes. Well, they weren't quite finishing up, but they were on they had already done quite a bit of work. So I did a lot of scenes. I did the animation of the Fez Master, and there was kind of mechanical robot type stuff that I did. There's a walking robot at the end. There's some crab creatures that I did some animation of. Yeah, just a lot of stuff. And I really, even though they're tiny little characters like that, I really tried to bring the Indiana Jones feel to it. So like I had a scene where Indiana Jones was in the water and he pulls himself out of the water, but Indiana Jones is not James Bond. He doesn't come out in a perfect suit every time he's in a situation. He gets messed up a little bit and he shakes himself off and keeps on going. So I remember specifically wanting to make him more indie-like in that way. So there's a scene where he gets in the water and he pulls himself out and his hat's all washed up and over his face, and he's kind of like, oh man, and he just kind of pulls the hat off, flings out the water off it and puts it back on his head and then continues on. But I tried to put little touches like that just to make Indy a little bit more human. He's not James Bond. He's kind of a regular guy who's just has a few extra talents, I guess. But for the most part, he's just like sort of like the
guy with the whip,
guy in extraordinary circumstances.
And what was it like working with Noah Falstein again on the project? You both moved from the dig to Fate of Atlantis together at the same time?
Well, I didn't see Noah so much after the dig. I was mostly working with Hal. We had I was mostly in the art department. There were other animators. Brent Anderson was working on it. By the time we had hired the head of the art department, then Colette Michaud, and we were doing just like animations. I remember Brent doing some animation of like a guy guarding a nightclub, and Colette did a lot of the animation of Sophie, Sophia Hapgood, and worked on that for a while. It was a good experience working on that. Because I was really really just unhappy about what happened with the first dig. So,
did you use rotoscoping for any of the animations in Indiana Jones?
Not on Fate of Atlantis. No.
Did you fear that this project might get canceled as well?
At this point, a lot of stuff had already been done by the time I'd gone on this project. So I didn't feel like that was going to happen, or I was hoping it was going to happen. As I was to find it out later, there's a lot of projects you can go a long ways, and they'll go ahead and give it the axe. So, but that's just Hollywood, or that's the entertainment industry. But yeah, that didn't set in for a while. This idea of that I'd get canceled again. I just thought it was like that getting canceled was just like a very rare thing that happens, and just a kind of a anomaly. But what I was to find was that projects get canceled all the time.
Yeah, and in these conversations, I get to find out which super interesting games got canceled along the way.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the Boba Fett adventure game, which could have been a classic.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, people just didn't realize how important Boba Fett is to the Star Wars universe.
Yeah. It's the one that we had proposed. Yeah, that was way early, but we just liked the character. We just thought he had a cool costume and stuff. So
which project did you work on after that?
It's hard to get the timeline right, but I mean, there were a few times where I would just jump from project to project for a little while. I'd work on a project for a few months, then move on to another project. And I don't remember the order. It's a big blur to me. But I worked on Fate of Atlantis until that was finished. And I even did a few small animations for Monkey Island 2, the Voodoo Lady, and a few other things like that.
Really?
I did. Mm-hmm, yeah. Just as a placeholder. And then I worked on some other games. I did some backgrounds for Super Star Wars.
Because you're not credited on Monkey Island 2.
No, I know. It was just some really small scenes that just kind of filling time here and there. It's like you got a free artist till we figure out what we're going to do with this guy, and so why don't we just give a few scenes to him? So
these were animations that made it into the final game.
Yeah, I did. I did the same with the Voodoo Lady. She's like mixing stuff up over her head and
shaking the juju bag.
Yes, yeah.
That was you.
Yeah,
that's an awesome animation, man.
Thank you. Yeah.
And a very memorable one.
All right, great. Thanks.
So after that, you worked on the Loom CD-ROM version. So you were the only one from LucasArts working on the animations?
For Loom and Zach McCracken, I worked with Jen Sward, and she was kind of like a special project, doing special projects, and I just kind of upgraded those. And those were kind of like in between projects, there might be some lag time before everyone's ready for the artist to come on. And so I worked on those particular projects. The Loom thing was... it was actually just kind of really just they kind of gave me free rein, just do something. I guess I'd shown that I could do some funky animation stuff. So I really experimented with using depaint anim brushes and doing special effects stuff and trying to use some of the higher end features that was in depaint to create this one scene of the bad guy entering. But it was just like really all experimental. They just wanted to have a CD-ROM version that was just a step up from what had originally been there.
And did any of these animations make it to the final game?
I believe so. I don't always look at the stuff that I work on. I know it's out there somewhere, and most of the time it does end up there. I mean, I've asked people, but I don't know. I'm pretty sure that the Loom stuff and the Zach McCracken stuff did end up somewhere. It's just I didn't go play them myself. So.
Well, we'll soon watch the demo reel, and we'll see the awesome scene you were talking about chaos appearing, and that was a scene that was removed in the final game. Do you know why these things weren't implemented? So, for example, were you informed of which scene will make it to the final game, or
Which scene are you talking about? Are you talking about particularly?
the one in which chaos appears, and then you have some sort of blue whirlwind?
Yeah.
And
It
then
was just,
an
they just said
explosion.
come up with a interesting new entrance for this character, and so I did it. I don't know if it was cut or
It was.
So well, that's there. It was. I mean, it was a big scene. Maybe the computer couldn't handle it, but that's what they asked me to do. So it must have got cut. I don't always know what gets. I don't always play the games that I work on. I do the art. I do the artwork, and then I get a good game player to say, "Yeah, help me skip over here. I want to look at this artwork." I like the games mostly for the artwork more than playing the game. But so a lot of these things, I just do the job, and then it disappears into the ether. Did it get done or not? I have no idea. It's like you hear about a lot of actors who are like, I do the movie, I never saw the movie. There's a lot of actors like that. And you just do the thing. It exists on the time you're doing it, and I'm probably a little bit like that. I don't necessarily have to play the game to see. I just like find somebody good and zip forward, and we'll see how my scene plays, and then that's as far as it goes for me.
But yeah, I want to share the animation we're talking about. This one, in which chaos appears.
Right. So yeah, I was using the Anim Brush. The Anim Brush is a very cool feature. And I haven't seen any animation programs that do what it can do. But you basically, it's a brush, and you can have an animated character. And you can stamp that character onto backgrounds and things like that. And you can also morph. And I use this morph. The morph tool a lot on these anim brushes, where explosions and stuff, where I would just like draw the first frame and then draw the last frame, and then the computer would extrapolate, would kind of figure out the frames in between, and it would look like an explosion. So you could do things like that, where
so the explosion was a drawing, it wasn't a photorealistic animation.
That was stuff I drew. I would draw the first panel, and then I would draw the last panel. But see, that was all. That would be That was made by the computer. I drew the last panel like this. I drew the first panel, and then there's a morph function that you can use in Anim Brush, and it kind of like figured out what was kind of in between. So that was just kind of a fun way to experiment with stuff.
Yeah, you can see the morph after the explosion. You can see that the morph turns into chaos.
Right. Yeah, and you would touch it up so it would look less morphy. But I experimented with stuff like that. I started that little swirl. I just drew a kind of galactic swirl that was kind of flat on screen, and with the Anim Brush, you could actually tilt it in space. First of all, I drew the swirl and rotated it like a wheel, and put all that in an Anim Brush, and then tilted the whole thing in space, which is a cool thing for that time period to be able to do that, and it looks great, So
it does.
Looking for an excuse to use that. Just the tool was doing a lot of the work for me.
Did Brian Moriarty ask you to do this?
This was
or after this was after you left. Actually,
was the head of this particular project. She did like a lot of special projects like that, and so she just kind of gave me free rein, just kind of play around with stuff and do a cool scene.
This game is influenced by Sleeping Beauty, and there's a scene in Sleeping Beauty with this type of swirl. So it's interesting.
Right. Yeah, Sleeping Beauty turns up a lot. Actually, I didn't create like the backgrounds that appear in Loom. That might have been like Mark Ferrari or Ken Macklin or somebody else. But there was definitely a lot of people looking at Ivan Earl and Ghibli Studio stuff. And later on, I would use a lot of stuff in Sleeping Beauty, like in Full Throttle, and you see the afterburners of the motorcycle. I basically copied that from Sleeping Beauty, the
Really?
Dragon's Breath. The Dragon's Breath. I didn't, the fire that comes out of the Dragon's Breath. I just liked the way it looked, and so I basically used that as a basis to draw some flames, and that became the afterburner on Ben's motorcycle, and I reused it later on, used that exact same animation later on, just tweaked it around a little bit, and it became the animation that brings Hades on in Herc's Adventures. So I got a lot of use out of
Sleeping Beauty.
Sleeping Beauty was like a constant inspiration.
It's a good thing that Disney now owns LucasArts, so they can sue themselves for being too influenced by their own movies.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on to The Dig version 2. And how soon after Brian Moriarty took over the project did you rejoin the Dig team?
Yeah, I think that he had to work on it because he wasn't going to use the original artwork that was established in Noah's version of the Dig. He had to, he wanted to do his own thing, and he had to do kind of on his own in his office. And while that was happening, that's when I was doing all these little special projects and little extra stuff. But then I got brought back onto Brian's version of the Dig, and which was very different. It was I don't know, a little bit more, more new agey, I guess. Than the Dig was more hard sci-fi, and the Moriarty version was had a lot of like glowing crystals and things like that. But there was there were a lot of cool ideas, and he actually was able to get a few puzzles. I mean, I think almost all the projects that I worked on that didn't happen had this problem where maybe people were intimidated by the Spielberg connection or something like that, and had trouble trying to live up to all the hype about him, Steven Spielberg's name or something like that, and it probably invoked a little bit of paralysis in terms of coming up with the actual story or puzzles and things like that. And so there was a lot of time, a long period of time on Brian's project where nothing seemed to be happening, but I was creating characters and stuff like that. But there were a few interesting animations that I did. Bill Eakin had a rough sketch of the what became the eel creature. It was basically my misinterpretation of his drawing that ended up being the design of the eel creature. He had this. He actually had more of a dragon, and I didn't really notice that it had arms. And so I just kind of had more of an eel. The puzzle actually dealt with, it's a Cyclops kind of character, and it had this one big eye in the front. And you're supposed to kill the eel creature and take its eye and use the magnifying power of it to do some stuff. I forgot what the puzzle was, but that was the idea behind it. And so I did lots of animations that didn't. Obviously it did nothing. Very little of my animation actually made it to the final game, but I did animations of this eel creature, like eating a little alien penguin type character. I had another scene that's been lost to time where there were two eels fighting over a human and then ripped the body in half. There was another scene that I did of there was a puzzle where you're supposed to go to a dig and you find all these bones, you put them back together, and the character, the skeleton resurrects. Mm-hmm. And so I did animation for that for the Brian Moriarty version. But all that type of stuff didn't actually come to pass. I think there was a little bit of animation that I did that actually made it to the final game, which was some water animation. There was a water puzzle where you're supposed to use the water to move from one side of a mountain to another. There's a gap. There's a path with a gap in it, and you have to go from one end to the other. But the only way you can get across is to ride over the wave from one side to the other. Yeah. And so that's the only thing that I did that actually ended up in the final dig. Everything else, is just on the internet, I guess.
I would love to see the original version of the dig with all of your animations. When I talked to Noah Falstein, I told him that I'm willing to launch a Kickstarter of Noah's dig. And when I'll talk to Brian Moriarty, I'll also suggest launching a Kickstarter for Brian's dig and then using all the original artwork. And who knows? Maybe it's a better game. I love the dig, but the concepts I saw in Noah's dig and in Brian's dig were super interesting, and it was super disappointing that most of them were scrapped on the way.
Yeah, it's too bad. Some of the best projects I ever worked on in games or movies are the stuff that gets dumped. I've worked on a lot of projects where actually it seemed like it would be real cool if they ever got done, and they don't get done. Unfortunately, well, that's show business.
Let's watch some unused artwork for.
Okay, yeah. So this is what we're looking at here. Is I did a painting here. I knew what Brian said was that he wanted to do a puzzle where you basically find a skeleton, and then you have a bunch of pieces, and you reassemble the creature, and then you bring it back. So you see in the second one, you see the first one. This is what you find. I did the painting, and you see the little pieces of the bones, and then you have all these bones left over that you see on the right, and you just have to put them in the right place. And once you put them in the right place, then the creature can come back to life. And so what I wanted to do is make it a little bit confusing. So I wanted to make it intentionally design the creature in such a way that you can't tell the head from the tail. That would just be a little bit too easy. So I gave the creature kind of a club tail. And the club has a little hole in it, so people are going to look at that and think it's a skull, but it's actually just a club. And then it gave them this kind of strange eyeless skull. So it would just mix people up, so they wouldn't know what they were looking at. And so the final version of this ended up being the turtle puzzle in the final game, but
infamous
basically that was the basic idea behind it was a puzzle that they definitely wanted to have in this game.
And how is the player supposed to know how to assemble the skeleton? You can pick up each of these pieces one at a time, spin it around, and then just place it where you think it needs to go, and then you can try all kinds of different variations. But the creature's not going to come back to life until it's all the pieces are put in the right place. So you put them where you think they're going to go. They should go. You try to set it to turn back to life. If it's not, if things are in the wrong place, it's not going to work. That's as far as it went. So, did you see what they did in the final game in terms of the solution
I've
this puzzle?
I've seen pictures of it. Yeah, they have the turtle thing. But
they have the turtle thing, but it seems like there were screenshots that were released pretty close to the actual release of the game that didn't have a fossil in the lagoon next to the turtle, but in the final game they have a fossil over there. And when you look at the fossil, you actually see how you're supposed to put the skeleton back together. And then you look at that, and then you know how to solve the puzzle, and then you go to the turtle and you solve it. But most people miss that, and so that's why people don't like the turtle puzzle that much.
Okay, well, I don't know. I mean,
but this looks super awesome because unlike the turtle puzzle, you actually have to collect the bones right?
Right.
You had to
Right.
go around and collect them from various places, so you never
Right.
actually know if you have everything or you don't, or
right. And you could spin them around, and you could, just put them where you think they get where they go. And like I said, I tried to make it as ambiguous as I could. And I believe this, a working version of this did happen for the Pizza Orgy. So, so people did try it and play it. So,
and so it was the same concept. You had to assemble the skeleton and then place the bomb and then revive it.
okay. The bomb, I don't know. There's this was just like, for some reason you need to get the creature back to life, and I don't really remember what the reason was. But I did do a walk cycle for the alien. I did an animation of the skeleton being reanimated into a creature. And how that fits into the rest of the story, I'm not completely sure of.
So in the final game, you need to put the turtle back together, and then you place a bomb and revive it. And then when the huge eel, eats the turtle, then the turtle explodes and you kill the eel, and then you can go underwater, because otherwise you'll have a monster in the water. Okay.
So this is the walk cycle of the alien. So that you can see which way it walks. It's a strange looking character, but this is the way it walks. So the head is on the right and the tail is on the left, and it has kind of these bat wings. So yeah, there's some animation that I put up on the net that has that shows the finished walk cycle. But this is what all the frames look like individually. Yeah, and this is a painting of this is like a test painting that I did. That's based on a Ken Macklin drawing I did. He wanted to see how we could paint me, and Larry had just started there, and so we did kind of paint tests to see how well we could paint. What there you see the background and the turtle there that I painted based on Ken Macklin's sketch. The foreground elements were actually just things we put there that were painted by Ken Macklin. You see on the far left there's a dark tree, and then there's kind of a pine cone looking tree on the front. Those were done by Ken Macklin, and we were just doing some experiments with parallaxing, which was at that time hadn't been really done. We were trying to do the type of thing where you come onto the set, and then the camera pans in, and then the foreground parallaxes. So that's what we're doing, trying to do with that, anyways.
And so this is the creature that you're not supposed to know is a turtle, basically.
Yeah, I think.
You think it's a mountain, but it's a turtle.
You enter it from the back. I don't remember what it was, but however it is, yeah. Or maybe they just don't show it. Or maybe it just wasn't as obvious. I don't remember what it was, but it's not supposed to be as obvious that this is a turtle.
Okay.
But I don't remember all the details.
Let's watch the demo reel. Well, skip.
Okay. That's the animation I did for the intro of Herc's Adventures. Got a little Sam and Max hit the road action happening there. A little bit of
Mortimer.
And yeah, I did a lot of animation on Full Throttle. This was one of the characters that dies, and this is in Brian's version of the dig, and so one character falls to her death. It doesn't look like the way it was in the actual game. The water that you see was color cycled, so it looks like it's moving, but that doesn't really transfer into video when you try to do it. If this was a test video, that was a test video. I knew that at that point. I knew that was for Iron Phoenix.
Yeah, we'll discuss it in a moment. We'll watch the dig scenes first. Okay, so this is the eel eating the creature, basically.
Eel eating kind of one of the native penguins. So yeah, yeah. A lot of these you don't see the color cycling, but there was like color cycling. It just like this eel just eats penguins. So you always know. You know, I think part of the puzzle I think was that you had to somehow get a penguin to lure the eel over. So like I said before, you're trying to get the eel's eye. So you get the eel over. You electrocute the eel and then take its eye.
So maybe the penguin was the solution to that puzzle instead of the bomb.
You have to somehow get a penguin over there, knowing that the eel would take it, and then once you get the eel in within range, you electrocute it, and then you take its eye. I
think the eye is for the bat puzzle. You need to place the eye on a flashlight, and then this will scare off the
stuff like that. I mean, it's stuff like Brian's version is completely different from the final version, but a lot of stuff and did end up surviving. But Sean and Brian and Noah each had their own versions of the digs, which were completely different from each other. They brought their own vision to each of those games, and some stuff things carried over, others did not.
Yeah, it seems like most of the concepts remained in a way, but were simplified. So, for example, you still have to scare off the bats, but you use a flashlight. You don't need to take the eel's eye to do that.
Yeah, there might have been some other reasons for the eye lens. But I don't remember. There might have been. You might have used it for a mechanical reason or some other thing. But the eye was a big deal.
Okay, so this was the walk cycle we talked about?
This is the walk cycle of the alien, and that's the eel getting electrocuted. And somehow
by what?
That was part of the puzzle. You had to set up a few things, and then when you see the eel come by, you turn it on and it gets electrocuted. I don't remember all the details, but yeah, the idea was to electrocute it. And here's where you see this skeleton come back to life. So you see it start off as a skeleton, it gets levitated, and then suddenly it's a full creature. And there's a pterobat and a goofy alien that I created. Again, all based on 6 limbs.
Yeah, they all have 6 limbs.
Yeah, all 6-limbed creatures. Then you get the little cucumber creature there, 6-limbed creature. Kind of looks like a vegetable. Kind of looks like an alien, and it gets dragged up by the pterobat.
Cool. Now, when did you find out that this version of the dig was canceled?
Well, that really kind of sucked that 2 versions of the dig that I was on got canned, and that wasn't the end of that, because this is like I worked on several Indiana Jones games that did not pan out either. But I wasn't especially happy to see that type of stuff happen. But again, that's life. But in the meantime, I did get to work on Herc's Adventures, Full Throttle, Curse of Monkey Island. A lot of games that actually did ship. So I don't feel like a total failure.
Not a failure at all. All of the things that were removed were not because they weren't.
Yeah, this is just a variety of reasons. Who would have known that you can't put Hitler into a video game? So yeah, that was
I remember when I first saw the demo reel when you released it on YouTube, how amazed I was by a lot of the things that were removed, because for the dig, for example, these are things that we've heard of over the years, but never saw anything animated. We saw screenshots or concept art, but never saw an actual animation from the game. So, it's like finding a time capsule.
There's so much artwork that was. It's sad because there's tons of art that was that people worked on that was just amazing stuff that that didn't as far as I know nobody saved it in any way. I don't know.
Isn't it in the LucasArts archives?
Jim Cloud's spaceship interiors. I thought those were really cool, but I've never seen those anywhere, and I don't know what happened to them.
Okay, moving on to Indiana Jones and the Iron Phoenix.
Yeah.
How soon after Fate of Atlantis was released did you start production on Indiana Jones and the Iron Phoenix?
Like I said, the timeline on this stuff is really fuzzy to me. And there was actually another Indiana Jones that I worked on. It may have even come before Iron Phoenix. Yeah, there was. I worked on a young indie game that did not happen. That one dealt with the creation of basically the machine gun that they used in biplanes at the time. So you had to be able to shoot through the propeller, and so timing was a big element. And so all the young Indiana Jones had to have a educational element to it, and so that was basically the hook on that one. Because it's a real life invention made by real people, and they had to put together a story based on that. But again, it was it just didn't work out for a host of reasons. In terms of Iron Phoenix, that came later. Again, working on a bunch of projects in between, jumping from project to project. Iron Phoenix. What can I say about it? We did have relatively. Well, no, I wouldn't say that. And we actually. It's weird because I get Iron Phoenix and the Young Indie project mixed up. There's a lot of similar elements in both of those games, but there was a lot of artwork that was done for Iron Phoenix by the time I got on. Usually they work on these things, doing all the backgrounds and stuff before they bring the animation on. And so I came on later, and usually as a lead animator, basically I'm designing all the characters and giving them walk cycles and stuff like that. And once all that's done, usually start bringing on other animators to do the gameplay animation. And so we didn't get much farther than all the walk cycles. All the characters had some were figured out, but I'd done walk cycles for all the characters, but we only had a few puzzles that actually really worked for Iron Phoenix.
Can you name a few puzzles that made it into the game?
Well, there was a puzzle where Indy is trapped in the basement of a ship or a submarine or something like that, and there's just whatever happens to be in the cargo hold or whatever he's in. He's locked in there and held prisoner, and so we're trying to come up with ideas for puzzles for that. How do we get Indy out of the cargo hold? And so I thought back to one of my shop teacher in high school, and he told about the story of there's one kid who was working with an air tank or something like that, and he somehow knocked off the end of it, and so the air tank flew out. It flew away like a torpedo and went through like several walls. It was just like a torpedo. It just moved in a straight path through a wall and went through several classrooms before it finally came to a stop. I thought that would be so cool to incorporate that into a game somehow. So I got the idea of doing a scene with this kind of air tank. It just happens to be sitting in the cargo hold and a hammer, and Indy just takes the hammer, knocks the end off of it, and this air tank, like a torpedo, just blows through the door. And that eventually got changed, where they actually had the rivets being melted out with the air tank, and then he takes down the door that way. So that was one puzzle. there were other and again I get a lot of these puzzles mixed up with the other game, but there were things that took place in a bar. I think that might have been the Young Indie one. Was where things take place in a pub. There's some stuff that took place in at a train station. There was some other puzzle that had to do with answering cones. Like a Buddhist type thing. But mostly it was like the animation was pretty rudimentary. We mostly just had walk cycles and stuff like that, and we had rooms that some of them were finished and some of them weren't. We could have characters that could walk around the rooms, but the special animations weren't always finished, or we didn't have the game finished enough to actually start them.
So you took part in the puzzle design as well in this game?
We had meetings, but I think Eric and Bill were mostly doing it on their own, and occasionally, if I was in a meeting, I'd try to bring some stuff into the game. A lot of the time with these games, they didn't have anything for the lead animator to do, and I'm just sitting there. Well, you got something for me to do, and so that's when I would come up with my own things like that. There's a Adolf Hitler animation that I did. I knew that Adolf Hitler was going to be destroyed at some point, so I just I'm got nothing to do. I'll just do a animation of Hitler and then just destroy Adolf Hitler in the most disgusting way that you possibly could. And so I just had this idea. Okay, well, he just kind of explodes from the inside, and so that's what I made happen. I made him, his guts come out of his mouth, and then his skin melts and stuff like that. And it's just something I did kind of really just quickly, but there was no solid. I didn't have any solid information on how he was actually going to die. But I just thought, well, this is good. Here's a test.
So this is the animation. So it's very similar to the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, I mean, I was inspired. Like I said, I was just making this stuff up because there wasn't anything for me to do. There was also some stuff that I had done where I knew that there was this kind of blank area on a plane where there's probably going to be some puzzles on the plane, but nobody had figured them out. So I said, I took it upon myself, because I had nothing to do, to come up with some puzzles on the plane. And so I had this idea that there's a big Nazi on a plane with Indiana Jones. I don't remember what the reason was, but there's a big Nazi and you're fighting him. And he's this guy, every time he's just like this big monster of a soldier. And every time you punch him, he just shakes it off and then punches you back. Mm-hmm. And this would just go on and on and on. And so people were trying to do things like, okay, well, grab the wrench and hit him with the wrench. And he would just shake it off. And what turns out to be the solution to the puzzle was that you grab the steering wheel, turn the plane upside down. So now you're on top of the of the Nazi, and then you can take him out that way. That was my, it was a proposal. I had nothing better to do this. Let's try something like this. It was also an idea that I didn't want just to have these games where it's a tiny little figure moving around in an environment, that you could do the same puzzles, but in a fixed environment where you could have close-ups, and it's not just one character walking. I mean, it's an airplane, so you can't really do a wide shot of that. Everything has to be more or less in a close-up, and you're kind of locked above the air, above the water in the air. So I thought, okay, well, let's try a different kind of a puzzle this time. But if the art for that exists somewhere, I don't know. I'd love to see.
Maybe it's in the LucasArts archives. They tend to keep these things in safe place, I think. I don't know.
Well, a lot of stuff just got dumped, as far as I know. I mean, there's a lot of artwork. I mean, there's stuff I've seen on the web, but I know that there's a lot more that is just the technology moves on, and nobody bothers to save the old artwork and convert it to something that can be looked at
Yeah, but for example, in the Day of the Tentacle remastered version, they actually went to the LucasArts archives and got the original recordings and re-edited them and got the concept art. So I think there's something in the LucasArts archives. I don't know if there's something from the production of The Dig or Iron Phoenix, but hopefully, once we'll get access to it.
Yeah. There was a lot of stuff in Noah's Dig. You know, there's stuff that Terry Whitlatch and Ian McCaig did of these six-legged John Carter type characters. But I don't know if any of that got saved anywhere. They might have done those freelance, and then which meant the rights went back to them or something like that. So who knows? The older the game, I think harder it is to find that type of stuff because you know, you're talking about floppy disk stuff, and if you got somebody who has a floppy disk, okay, this is a character from Iron Phoenix. This is like the main henchman, kind of like a Toth type character from the from Indiana Jones. Only this guy was more of a little bit more sinister. He wasn't the kind of like Peter Lorre type character that you saw Toth in Raiders of the Lost Ark. This was he was like a really cruel kind of mean character, and you know, this was like an initial sketch that I made of him. I think I'm pretty sure his name was Dunkelvolk. So was the name, and I mean, there were some other characters. It's like I kind of remember the names, but I don't remember exactly. There was another character named Jaeger, and a few other characters. I don't really remember, you know, what their purpose was and stuff like that. It's just a few random things that come into my memory. But yeah, this was one character that I designed and you know, did a smaller version of it and had a walk cycle and everything like that for him.
So, in addition to the walk cycles and the animation of Hitler and this concept art, which other key scenes did you specifically contribute to in the game?
Mostly, like I said, it was mostly designing characters and giving them walk cycles. We didn't get to a point where there was a lot of solid
close-ups or I don't know.
Yeah, no, we didn't do a lot of that. You know, it was the basic. There was some basic animations that you do in a story game. You know, walking, then pick something up, and we use those as kind of a stand-in for some of the kind of more situational animation. But I don't remember a whole lot happening in Iron Phoenix. That you know, the development on that moved at a really slow pace. I wasn't getting puzzles for me to animate. You know, that you know, this wasn't ready or that wasn't ready. So,
yeah. At what stage of production was the game canceled?
They had there's, you know, we never even did any of the ending of the game, which would have taken him to South America. Okay, we barely got him off of so none of that happened. None of that was figured out. We had him walking around some of the environments in United States, I guess, or wherever everything was happening. But mostly we just had some half-drawn or half-painted backgrounds. Some of them were finished, and we just had a character that could walk around them. But special animations, not so much. You know, we didn't have any. It wasn't solid enough. I don't think to warrant having finished animations like that, as I remember. Yeah, you know, it wasn't like the Dig, at least with Brian's version. You know, there were the penguin animations and stuff like that, but we never really got that far in Iron Phoenix, as I remember.
So they came up to you one day and told you that the project was canceled?
Yeah, basically, yeah. They told us, or yeah.
Now, around the same time, 7 Maxi The Road was released. Now, according to Moby Games, you're not credited on the game,
I worked on, again, this is a special edition type of thing. I think, I don't know if that was on the actual regular version of the game, but a later release has some of these cutscene animations that I did.
So this
Like
animation is for a special edition?
I believe so, yeah.
I remember playing the game. I got the CD-ROM version of Sam & Max, and I saw this animation, and I didn't play the floppy version until much later in life. And then I played the floppy version, and I didn't see this animation.
Yeah.
And then I was certain that this is for the CD-ROM version, like a CD-ROM version scene that you don't get in the floppy version, probably due to size, because these type of animations.
It was really hard for
were
computers to run something like this at that time, which is, you know,
I remember arguing with someone on Twitter because people kept telling me that this scene is also available in the floppy version, and I couldn't get a hold of the floppy version to actually test it out. And now you're telling me that it's actually for
that's my understanding. Yeah, my understanding that this was for a higher end version of the game. I could be wrong, but you know, like I said, I don't always follow. I do the animation, then I move on.
But unlike the things we saw up until this point with the dig, this actually made it to the final game and left an impression on me. It was a really cool animation.
Yeah.
Well done.
Thanks. Yeah.
Did you work on any other scenes in the game or just this one?
For Sam & Max, I don't. That's the only one I can think of. There might have been something maybe with the whack-a-mole or something like that, but that was the main thing I worked on. Was this, you know, these large-sized animations. I didn't work on any of the regular gameplay animation. It was just like that one scene. It was actually a scene that was had been already started by Steve Purcell had already kind of set it up, but he hadn't done the animation, so he set up the characters, and I just kind of finished it up.
Moving on to Full Throttle. When did you join the Full Throttle team?
Full Throttle, yeah, I was pretty much on that from the start, at least in terms of what, when they usually bring animators on, which is usually a little bit after all the backgrounds and stuff have already been started. So I'm fairly sure, yeah. The way I remember it was fairly early on when it was. I think. Hard to remember this stuff. So, but
and you worked, like we saw in the demo reel, you worked on most of the cutscenes, all of the cutscenes. Which scenes did you work on?
Yeah, I did a lot of cutscenes. I did a lot of gameplay animation. Yeah, I did. I did a lot of stuff on Full Throttle. Scenes with Ben kicking down the door, him sucking gasoline on the front of the truck, doing all the animation that happens on the front of the truck. A lot of stuff in Melonweed with the motorcycles, the kicking up smoke. Here's one that was interesting. And here again. This is that's the Dragonfire. The original for this was we just had the still artwork of the bike, and basically I was supposed to put Ben's leg in there and kind of get the do the kickstarting the bike, but it just made the way it looked was that it just made the bike look like it was made of rock or something like it, because it was so steady and this leg comes down, and so we had to do a little bit of animation to kind of make the motorcycle give a little bit, which is something, in those days you really had to pay attention to how much stuff was moving on the screen at the same time, because it just you wouldn't get performance. But we tried as best we could to get the whole bike moving without sacrificing a lot of performance. But making that bike give when he brings his leg down kind of makes all the difference, because if you saw what the animation looked like before you had that, it just kind of looked ridiculous. It looked like he was on a concrete statue and then his leg just comes down, but the bike is just solid as a rock. It didn't work, so we just kind of like, I had to have some of the background redrawn as I kind of squished the bike down a little bit. But I think
you also worked on the iconic scene in which Ben pulls the bartender's nose ring and tells him that the bar would look better on his face. Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff that I did on these scenes. I also did the Mumbledy Peg scene with the hand and the knife, and the newscaster. There's a lot. There's a lot of stuff I didn't put on this reel. There's just like tons and tons and tons of stuff that I did for this particular game.
I love the newscaster scene we just saw the other day, and the fact that every time the newscaster would say something shocking, he'd look closer at the camera.
Exactly. Yeah, that was something I did very specifically, because I didn't want it just to be an animation of a mouth moving, because there really wasn't a lot to play with, and I just thought it would, if I could have a scene where he just leans forward and then moves his mouth, the programmers could put that in just the right spot to emphasize certain lines, so the lines wouldn't read so dead. Just a mouth moving. If he emphasized stuff by, it's really just the same animation, just kind of pushed forward, and he's just kind of leaning forward a little bit.
It was great, and it was super amusing because he would say that the polecats have been accused of murder.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I thought that was something that worked out really well.
So all these cutscenes that we're seeing now, you've worked on all of them from start to finish?
Well, a lot of these CG parts, I did not. The
CG parts were probably with the Rebel Assault engine. They used the 3D
CG parts were done by like a lot of them were done by Richard Green, like this. I believe Richard Green, but I animated the characters on top of them.
And this is frame by frame animation, basically.
Yeah.
Wow.
And here again, I think we really pushed it here. Is like you can see the background moving, and you can see the foreground moving, which is a big deal to do in that having whole huge sections of the screen moving at the same time like that was kind of a big deal. But it worked, and it really, without that kind of parallaxing and the moving, the scene really plays very, very dead. You really have to have that front of that truck rocking in the background, and the background just kind of moving. It really makes a huge.
It gives you the sense that they're about to fall.
Yeah, you get more sense of the space, and it feels a little more dangerous.
And if I remember correctly, I think the limitations of the engines, the limitations of the engine were that only 30% of the screen could move, or something like that. Some business like that, and so we were very lucky that we were able to get some of these scenes to really work. And of course, you have this iconic scene.
Right. Yeah.
Now, this iconic scene is also the cover art for the game.
Very similar. Yeah, I worked on the cover, but it was it was basically the same idea. This was basically Richard Green put this together, and then I kind of came in and did the character artwork a little bit, just kind of make it somewhere in between, cartoon and realistic looking, because it didn't. This is a CGI bike, but the cartoon character on a CGI bike didn't look right, so they wanted to get something that was kind of like partway in between. So I helped out with that. Things got changed, but essentially that's what that was. And been riding out of in a ball of flame. That was another big deal, because all the flame back there was all moving, and it was even hard for me to just do an animation because it really slowed down the animation program just doing it. So I was really concerned, like, is this actually going to work when they try to put it into a game? Because just making it was slowing my computer down.
And it worked.
Yeah. And also, I guess there was the other thing was like right before that, there's a run cycle with with
right.
Ben that I did. I believe he already had a run cycle, but it was more of a regular run, and it didn't seem to work. Where if he's running from a flaming ball, that he should just run in his regular run. If you're running away from something, it's a different kind of a run. So I kind of took I noticed in watching all these Indiana Jones movies, like Indiana Jones, when he's running from something, his chest comes out. And so I animated this version of Ben running with his chest out because he's like trying to get away from the flaming ball, but it's a different kind of run, and I think it worked better this way than just using a standard run. And it's a 3/4 view run anyways. But
now this animation is used twice in the game. Once there's a water tower. If you try to climb the water tower, then it activates an alarm, and then the police comes, and then Ben runs away, and this is the run cycle they use. And then when you siphon gas from the police car, the police hovercraft, then they use this run cycle with a gas can in his hand, which is also super funny.
Right, yeah. I did the gas can too, right?
Really? You did the gas can?
Yeah.
In the run cycle?
In the run cycle. I had to add the gas can in there.
With the fuel leaking out because he forgot to close the gas can.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
You don't understand how iconic these animations are. Now, a few months after Full Throttle came out, the final version of the day came out. And did you get to play it back then?
I watched other people play it. I didn't play it myself. I watched other people play it, but it was good to finally see it coming to an end, because I'd been there for several years at the company for several years, and it was the first game I worked on. All these versions of it, and it was finally finished. So I was really happy for the team. I did not work on the last version of the team, of that game, other than a few of the water puzzles. But
because of the water puzzle animation that actually made it into the game, you got the additional animation credit. Unlike all of the people who worked on the previous versions, like Dave Grossman and Noah Falstein, who were placed under the Ghosts of Diggs Past credit.
Right, yeah. It was, yeah.
So how soon after that did you start working on Curse of Monkey Island? Immediately after Full Throttle, or were you working on Herc's Adventures?
I think I worked on Herc's Adventures for a while. So there was, there were some cutscene animations that I did, like of Jason. I did the screen, the character selection screen that you see at the beginning of the game. Lots of other characters. I designed some of the characters. I designed Talos and Circe. I think I designed Circe, maybe not, but I definitely designed Talos. And I did the animation, the kind of on and off animation of Hades. I remember designing the sheep. They get, the kind of oddball sheep that you see throughout the game, and the Cyclops. I designed the Cyclops and did a lot of animation with that. Yeah. So
and at the same time, you were working on
another game I worked on was Ghoul Patrol. So there was a lot of stuff where another area where I got to design a lot of characters and just kind of do some basic animations for them.
And speaking of the Nintendo games, you also worked on Super Star Wars.
Worked on Super Star Wars. I did some. I did the head icons that spin around, and I did a few scenes with. They were just kind of cutscene animations. Like this is a shot of Luke on Tatooine that I did. I did another one of Yavin, right? There's some that I did not end up saving, but that's the final. That was like the scene here is actually like it's like not a panning, a tilt shot where you kind of tilt down from very high and then it ends down on the final Star Wars Celebration. I also did a scene with the Leia interrogation and the scene inside is basically Luke's garage with the T-15 or whatever it is in the background. So just a few things like that, when these projects die, they got to figure out where you're going to go. So I end up just hopping from project to project a lot and doing like special projects. And
then you got to work on The Curse of Monkey Island. Were you a fan of the series at the time?
I'm sorry?
Were you a fan of the series at the time?
Yeah, I liked the game. Yeah, Monkey Island 2 was a very fun game. Larry basically designed it. My roommate Larry was one of the designers of it. This was actually a very challenging time for me because this was the first game where we actually had to animate it on paper. And for me, animating digitally on D-Paint is kind of a great equalizer. So if your drawing skills are kind of so, you can D-Paint hides a lot of problems. But now I'm on Curse. I had to we were doing cutscenes on paper, and then they were bringing in real animators who had worked on Disney projects. And I had to kind of keep up with them. So that was a little intimidating for me. So I actually had to learn how to really animate, large size characters, slow in, slow out, and squash and stretch was much more, much more evident in something like this than the kind of small typical game animation that you see. So I really had to up my game on this one. It was a scary time for me, but I eventually caught on. Mostly for whatever reason, I was good at doing like physical effects like smoke and stuff like that. So I ended up doing a lot of the flaming LeChuck scenes. So he had to do all this animation, and you had to have these kind of mouth movements, but you had to have a flame that's constantly going all the time, no matter how else he's moving, and it had to look continuous. So that was the tricky part about doing flaming LeChuck.
So you also worked on the lip syncing for the animation. You have
it was really interesting. For this, we had to do everything as if we were doing a TV show or a movie. So we did this the classical way. There was also a program that Vince Lee came up with, where a lot of that work was done for you. You would have a set mouth motions for various vowels and consonants, and Vince's program was able to pair that up with the sound so that you would get a rough version, with all the vowels and consonants put in the right place, and it just took a little bit of tweaking after that. So that solved a lot of the work problems. So brilliant
that
stuff.
Program would actually move the mouth, or it would give you the mouth movements according to syllables, and then you'd have to animate it yourself.
We had pre-drawn mouth motions that you could, that would be put on, you'd have the head or something like that without a mouth, and you would have the mouth motions, the O and the W and the, F and stuff like that. And then the program would read what the person is saying and just kind of roughly figure out, okay, that's probably where an F is and that's where an O is. And you'd look back at the animation and say, well, the computer's a little wrong there, and you can swap out the correct frame for it. But that saved a lot of work because you would get a good rough draft of the words, because there's a lot of words, get pushed out there, and it takes time to get all those words done, and having a machine do a lot of that work for you was kind of a help.
And we saw several scenes that you've worked on. Which other scenes did you work on? Did you also work
I did a lot
on
of
walk
stuff
cycles
with.
or?
I did. You know, a lot of the. I was they brought, like I said, they brought in a lot of traditional animators who were doing Disney stuff, and they weren't used to the gameplay animation where everything was done in index color with the small characters, and so I actually had to show them how index color works because you didn't want to borrow color slots from the background to do your animation. It would screw things up. So I had to show them how that works. They were used to working on pencil and paper. But I also did, like a lot of the I did a lot of other scenes that I didn't put up there. There were scenes that I did with Guybrush and Elaine. Those aren't on the reel because some of those had elements of other animators working on it. So I only put up, the things that I did by myself for those cutscene animations. But
Graham Annable also worked on several scenes.
Graham Annable sat right next to me in the office with Mark Overney. And Graham is an interesting character because he is a obsessive doodler, and he would draw these hilarious sketches of Mark, which would piss off Mark to no end. But I thought they were funny. He would draw Mark as this tiny little character wearing a hockey jersey, but he would just complain. He would draw him as like a little character this big. Tiny little character sitting on a table complaining about stuff, and Mark would just kind of just roll his eyes and was maybe wasn't happy about being made fun of. But Graham thought it was hilarious. I thought it was hilarious. But Graham was a consummate doodler. I wish I had that kind of artistic verve all the time. But so he also did. So Graham and Mark were some of those guys who came off of doing like Uncle Scrooge, and there were some other artists, Dave Devan, and what's the other guy? There's another guy, but they were all doing Disney level animation, and here I was having to try to keep up with them after spending years and years just doing these kind of pixels the size of your head type animation. So luckily people in the animation industry are pretty generous with their secrets. So it was a good learning experience for me.
Curse of Monkey Island marked the end of an era at LucasArts, with it being the last Scum game and the last 2D adventure game. Yeah. And the same year also worked on Herc's Adventures, which was also 2D. But your next project was Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine, which was a 3D game.
3D game.
Did you sense at the time that the switch to 3D was inevitable?
The switch, it was something that really caught me off guard. I was just getting used to this drawing on paper thing, and suddenly I'm doing 3D animation in 3D Studio Max. So I did a few of the animations in there. I think I might have done. I think I did some animation with some wolves. I did some various animations with Indy doing things. I was also doing a lot of effects animation for that game. I did when Indy fires his gun. The smoke comes up. I did the smoke effects and the water. This is the coastline that kind of moves in and out, and then there's the water pattern, which was basically a mosaic that again using the morphing tool in D-Paint Animator. Basically, the way the water pattern was created was I would take a shape that looked like an O and morph and a shape that looked like an X, and then I would morph between the X and the O, and make a tile of that animated, and then basically that created the building blocks for the water in the ocean. You see the background, there's this vast ocean, and it's all made of one tiny little tile animated in a loop, repeated over and over and over again. And so that's how we got the ocean. Just like it's a tiny little tile of a morphed animation of an X being morphed into an O. And I did.
And were these done in 2D?
Yeah, it was all 2D.
So
I used
the smoke.
The smoke, everything was the smoke and the water effects were all 2D, and they were just done by hand by me.
And you'd project them on a tile. Yeah,
I mean, I would have to adjust them a little bit so that they would work as a tile. But it was like a tiny little square that was a 0. And it would morph into an X, and then I would have to adjust them in Photoshop to make sure that the whole thing worked as a tile without any seams. And then then that would just be repeated in a big display, and that became the water. And then I basically also just hand animated the foaming water that comes in and out of the beach. Yeah, that was.
I remember back in 1999, I upgraded my graphics card, and the first thing I wanted to test out was the beach, and it looked impressive.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
So even when you worked on 3D games, you were still doing 2D animations for the game. Did you actually work on 3D models?
Yeah, I did do 3D models. I think there's some scenes with some wolves that I did some CG animation on, and just a few just like indie jumping around doing stuff. I don't remember all. I don't think I worked on any of the cut scenes or anything like that in that game. I was mostly working on effects animation and some of the really basic animation cycles with Indy and some of these other characters and enemies.
Well, a lot of the cutscenes were based on the actual models from the game, unlike the 2D adventure games when you have a cutscene that was vastly different than the gameplay. In Infernal Machine, they actually used the models from the game to make them talk to each other or whatever.
Yeah.
So when did you leave LucasArts, and what was the last project you worked on there?
The last project I worked on was Force Commander. And so I did CG on that. And this was just a huge barrage of characters. And basically I did CG animation of walk cycles. It would be just like a daily thing that I would do where they gave me a new character at the beginning of the day. I would draw a walk cycle, a death, an idol, an attack, or something like that. And depending on the character, some characters would be the last one. I would be doing like a character a day, maybe a character or two a day, depending. If it's minor characters, I'd do a couple a day. So some of the more complicated characters, I would do only. It would take a couple of days to do, but just like tons and tons of characters. There's different kinds of stormtroopers and different kinds of aliens and rebels that I had to draw, and so there was some fun stuff in there. I did a few of the cutscenes in there, or at least early iterations of them. There's a chicken walker running down a trench, and there's a scene of a bunch of stormtroopers piling out of a transport. So I did some of those. So those were cutscenes. They may have been changed, but I don't know. That was my last game. There was some fun stuff that I had fun with, like the stormtroopers. I had to do walks and deaths and stuff like that. So I made sure that when a stormtrooper got shot, they would get shot in the traditional stormtrooper fashion. They always do it the same. I don't know whether Stormtrooper you in these movies, they always make them die the same way. And so I made sure I would have death
They hit them on the
like
shoulder.
that. But I would give like several. They always die the same way. I don't know why. And then there was also I had to make some Ewok deaths. I had some fun with that. So there's like I did the standard Ewok deaths, but just for fun, I added a couple more. I did one Ewok death that was just kind of like this melodramatic. Oh, I get shot. And then before he finally hits the ground. And I did another one where an Ewok gets shot and he just flies across. He just gets hit and just goes flying way across space before finally stopping at a roll.
Seems like you don't like Ewoks.
Well, who likes Ewoks? I don't. No, nobody does. No, I don't know. I had fun with it. It was fun. But there's other stuff I got to. But it was really strange because these were hard to. In certain ways, it was hard to animate because these were what you were dealing with were very simplified characters. Because it was a strategy game. You had to try to make full, lush-looking animations, and these were basically, it would be the equivalent of like cardboard characters that have been, stuck together with, safety pins or something like that, and try to move them around. But they weren't fully rendered kind of characters. They were just like the idea of a character, and so I did a lot of that. Also, there was a little bit of a problem with the way that I was given the characters. They were given the characters with the first pose, and I had to animate to that pose, which really didn't work because the person who started the pose was not an animator. So you can't make natural animation if you have an unnatural pose. So
you started with a frame, and then you'd have to add the frames leading up to that
and the rest
frame.
of the animation, but the first frame wasn't right. So I started off with each of those characters and then just started over again with would be like a Jesus Christ pose, and then I would put the first pose in there and animate around that. But I don't know. I don't think that went over very well with the lead or something like that. I don't know what happened with there. But anyways, that was my last game.
And what did you do after you left LucasArts?
I started freelancing a while, doing storyboards for commercials and stuff. I did that for a while, and then there was a big .com bust. So this is the San Francisco area, so all the advertising agencies were kind of dependent on the .coms. And when the .coms go, the advertising agencies go, and the advertising agencies go, I got no work. But my brother, like I said, who was a concept and storyboard artist at ILM. He recently moved down south to LA to start not just working for ILM, but just working on the films themselves. I mean, they have, a lot of times the film companies, they will hire out special effects companies to do certain scenes, and those will have their own storyboard artists and concept artists and stuff like that. But they also have the storyboard artists who work directly with the director, at the early part of the production, and figure out how things work at the very beginning. So my brother came down here to start working that way, and I kind of followed afterwards. There was more work down in Los Angeles than there was in the Bay Area with all the .coms dying and stuff. So that brings me up to where I am now, and I'm just doing storyboards. I've done storyboards for movies like Wonder Woman, Fantastic Four, Christopher Robin, Prince Caspian. And so, that's what I've been up to for the last 20 years since LucasArts.
Yeah, but back in 2008,
I still work on games.
Back in 2008, you also worked on 2 video games, I recently interviewed Dave Grossman, and he mentioned he's worked on Insecticide. He was the creative consultant.
Yeah.
And did you guys get to work together on the project?
No, we didn't work together. I worked from home on that one, but I did get to design a lot of characters for Insecticide. I did a lot of the I storyboarded a lot of the kind of the cutscene animations for that. So yeah, that was Mike Levine, and who was at LucasArts, and Larry got together to put that together, and I really appreciate getting work from them once I was out of LucasArts. I designed a lot of the characters, the kind of hazmat suits that look like bees, the big bugs. I designed those, and a few other things. Not every design got used, but that's the way things work. I designed a lot of creatures and little gadgets like little spy bugs and stuff like that. I also did some work with Bill Tiller, doing some storyboards for him on A Vampire Tale.
A Vampire Story, yeah.
Yeah, and he was he was nice enough to ask me to do storyboards for his game there. So it was mostly storyboards for that game. Bill also helped me get onto Gauntlet. Was it Gauntlet 2 or something like that? And I did storyboards for that. Yeah, and there's like, I'm mostly working in film, but I've done a lot of game or game adjacent stuff. So like commercials for games or websites for games. I did artwork for a website for Dead Space 2 and for Dante's Inferno. They had their own websites that had little sequences in them that were kind of advertising the game. And various I still stay in touch with the game industry, from every now and then.
Even though you stay in touch with the game industry,
I still try to keep one toe in the gaming world if possible. Right now, because we have a Writers Guild strike happening here. My film work isn't really happening right now because all the productions are frozen. So I'm open to working on film work if anybody wants me to work on film work. I mean, game work. Did I say film work? Game work. I will totally work on game work because they're not on strike right now. So,
now you've worked on some of my favorite movies. You worked on Mr. and Mrs. Smith. You worked on Bruno. You worked on Passengers, and as you mentioned, Wonder Woman. Could you elaborate a bit on your approach when it comes to working on these big budget movies?
Well, every project is completely different. Passengers, it was just kind of like the movie was actually finished already, but they had a few scenes that they thought they needed to do to kind of clarify a few things. There was some tricky areas in the story, so I was called on to do some post boards of some scenes that they wanted to kind of like pick up shots to just kind of clarify the story a little bit. Some of these other games, some of these other films that I worked on, there are different kinds of storyboards. I worked on the pitch for Wonder Woman. So they had two directors who were in contention for directing, and one of them quit, and and Patty Jenkins was kind of the second one. They wanted to see, well, if you're going to do Wonder Woman, what's your Wonder Woman look like? We want to see a pitch, and so we had me and my brother had a weekend to come up with some art for her pitch of what her version of Wonder Woman looks like. And basically, the deal was, if they like your pitch, and the film actually gets made, then I get to work on the film when they really do it. So that happened. So I did some scenes in Wonder Woman as well as doing the pitch. Mostly, a lot of my gigs in the film industry have been with doing the pre-production. I work a lot with the Third Floor, and they do a lot of previs on games, but they still need storyboard artists to kind of figure stuff out. So I've done a lot of work with them doing previs. So yeah, and you know, this industry doing freelance storyboards it's very word of mouth. So you never know when you're going to get work or when you're not going to get work. So you're always hunting for work and keeping your fingers crossed.
And you've also worked on various TV shows like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and NCIS and Mom, and even award shows like the 2018 BET Awards.
Right, yeah.
Now, these types of projects are vastly different in terms of cinematography, filming angles, and scene structure. Unlike movies, which, you know, they don't differ that much. But, for example, on TV, you have sitcoms that have very specific filming angles. So what's your approach when it comes to TV?
TV is a very fast medium. So it's like you don't, in a feature, you get to maybe the director may want to explore stuff and say, well, let's see what this looks like. Let's see what that looks like. In TV, you know, if you're on a series, you don't really have time to explore. So the director usually knows what they want. So it's really just a matter of execution in TV. Hopefully the director knows what he wants and just needs somebody who can draw well enough to explain it to the rest of the crew. So hopefully if your director has a clear vision of what he's doing, then you just have to draw it. And you have meetings and make sure that you're both on the same page. You try to do it as quick as possible because they got really tight production schedules. So you can't. There's not a lot of wiggle room in TV. Now, features, on the other hand, it's like for Fantastic Four, I did 5 versions of the same shot over and over and over again. So let's do the same scene, only let's put hazmat suits on these guys. Instead of this guy, his flame petering out after a certain amount of time, he gets blasted by water. You just try different things over and over again, and so film tends to have a little bit more wiggle room where you try stuff out and see what sticks.
And so they ask you to create a storyboard for a scene, and they give you several days to come up with it, several hours. Usually it will take a few days, and usually it's kind of a back and forth. I show them some sketches and say, "Am I moving in the right direction? What do you think of this? What do you think of that?" And it's kind of back and forth, and a lot of it depends on the director. Sometimes the directors know exactly what they want, and they just say, "Why don't you just do it?" And others are just like, "Let me figure it out," or "Let's do that. Try this. Let's try that." It differs between directors. Everybody's got a different style of working and budget, and I think that plays a big part in it as well. Now, in one of these movies, do you have any storyboards that actually made the movie a vastly different movie than it was intended to be? Like they wanted to go one way, and then with the use of your storyboards, they changed direction completely, either in tone or I don't know, types of cinematography.
Well, let's see. I mean, I did have for Christopher Robin, I did some scenes that were, I drew it as a kind of a montage, and I'm not sure if that was necessarily the way that they were kind of envisioning it, but I kind of drew this montage of stuff happening early in the adult Christopher Robin's life during the war, and connected all the jumps in time with match cuts. And I don't know if they 100% went with that, but there was a different thought going into that, where it was a little bit more straightforward. So,
So this changed the editing process or the filming
it's
process
an
as
editing
well?
process as well. I think what what we do as storyboard artists is kind of pre-editing. So we just kind of figure out shots and close-ups or long shots and stuff like that, and we figure that out ahead of time. But we also can bring forward things like in that particular case, I tried to do a lot of match cuts. Where one time period would be connected to the other by match cuts, which isn't something that you can do without the storyboarding. You have to arrange the characters and stuff in such a way that that the next shot wherever they film is going to match up with it. So
the scenes have been filmed, and you just needed to come
no,
up
no,
with a
no,
storyboard
no,
of
no. The shots are just an idea. There's a script, and you work on it, and you give your version of it, and your work gets interpreted back again in a different way. They don't. Generally speaking, I don't see storyboards being followed directly, as the way they are drawn. Sometimes close, sometimes not. But there's a lot of iterations. You're just putting in your few cents. I mean, the cinematographer has his idea of what it should be. The director has his idea of what it's going to be. Editor has his idea as it's going to be. You as a storyboard artist, you're just putting in your 2 cents. And so I think you do have an effect overall, because most of people's jobs, you can't really see what it's going to look like ahead of time. The director can explain to you I'm going to do this with a long lens and it's going to look like this, and the director could do the same thing, but without image to work with. Other people aren't going to understand. That's where a storyboard artist has a big advantage. Here's what I was thinking of this scene, and this is what it looks like. So.
And do you fear that AI may take over the art of storyboarding?
Storyboarding, not so much. I'm feeling a little bit nervous for concept artists. They're probably going to get completely, or not completely, but they're going to get hit really hard by this. There's going to be a lot of concept artists put out of work, because it's just. You can just get, whatever your showrunner, whoever it is, type in a few words. Okay, there it is. That's what I wanted. I typed it in myself. And it's like, you get a machine that can do it in 15 minutes. Why would you want to hire a concept artist? Which I think is a shame, because most concept artists usually have a lot of background. It's not just drawing a pretty picture. It's the stories that go behind the images that you design. And I don't think the type of images that come from AI, as nice as they look, they don't always have a real story, or the way the way things work is not necessarily in them. It's just like pretty images. It's like, oh, that looks cool, and it's mixed in with that. That looks really cool, but is there a real story behind it? A really good concept design, usually there's a story. Just by looking at the image, you get a story. You see backstory just because a ship was designed a certain way. I mean, if the Millennium Falcon, as a bright, shiny ship with clean seams, it tells a very different story than one where it's all kind of like pieced together in a where it's dirty and pieced together in a kind of haphazard looking kind of way. That tells a very different kind of story, and usually it's a really good concept artist who brings that type of thing to concept work. So, but right now, I mean, because there's just, the writers are also worried about because a lot of the AI can write stories as well, or so they say, and they want to be able to talk about whether or not like, is this going to be a threat to, my employment? Are these scripts just going to be written by a machine in 15 minutes and then you just get to be a copy editor. The livelihoods of lots of people depend on whether or not a lot of these showrunners or producers or whatever are going to try to write some script in 15 minutes with a few keywords. And yes, there are lots of screenwriters who make a lot of money, but most of them are just kind of little middle class people, and their livelihoods are being taken away because some machine, you can type a few words in it and it can do some kind of semblance of a job, but it doesn't have. They don't, at least in my opinion, they don't have things like personal experience, lived experience. Somebody who's an immigrant and has had an experience in the United States at a certain time. Or humor. A machine can't really bring that to the fore. But if you have machines and it's much cheaper to have machine do that, then all we're going to have is just stories where people are just kind of take a little bit of this story and a little bit of that story. Okay, Stormtrooper versus Roadrunner. And that's all you're going to get. You're not getting any stories about like real people. So that's a concern.
And do you see any benefits to the use of AI in the movie industry?
I mean, I'm impressed with some of the images that I've seen. It looks good, but that can only last so long because it's eventually you get stuff like that. It's just going to cannibalize itself, right? It's all drawing from the same sources over and over and over again. It looks good now, but after a while, you're going to be seeing the same stuff over and over and over again because it's just drawing from Google or wherever it's drawing from. And it's a kind of a cannibalistic process. It's just the same few things, just kind of regurgitated in different ways, and it's not going to reflect real human experience, which is really what people when they see something that's really good, that's usually what hits them the most. There's some kind of lived experience that, well, in one way or the other, directly or indirectly, are being expressed. I mean, even something like a Star Wars is really not so much about, TIE fighters versus X-Wings. It's about small town life in a town like Modesto, where George Lucas grew up. That's really what the stories at their best are about. But I don't think a computer can really do that because it doesn't have the lived experience of something like that.
Now, before we conclude our conversation, I have to ask, do you have any insights regarding the origin of your last name?
Yeah, it's Chinese, and it's basically, a lot of people with the same last name would be ZHOU. It's the same thing as CHOW. Chow, Jiao, Zhao. For me, it just ended up coming back as JEW to my. I grew up and I got to hear both the Jewish and Asian things said at me. So I don't know. It's just like. Somebody at immigration just made a terrible mistake. But it's weird. I know Jack White doesn't have to, or Jack Black doesn't have to worry about that for some reason. But people come to me all the time. I went to, there are people come to me and think that my name is like a slur or something like that, and I made it up. And it's like I didn't choose this. I didn't choose this name. It's just the one I got. So
you got a cool title for your website. Named Jew.
Goy Named Jew, right? Well, that's my old blog. I haven't touched that one in a while, but
it's a cool title.
Yeah. I can't, but I do, if people want to see more of my art, they can see, they can go to, I have a Flickr site. I'm kind of in between websites right now. So you can go to my Flickr site, which is, you can go to ansonart.tripod.com/landing, which is, you have to make sure you put the landing in there, /landing. And it will take you to the new face page of my Flickr site. And you can see all my artwork there. I've got interviews that I've done at Comic-Con. I've got all kinds of things on that website you can look at. I also have some Redbubble sites where I have T-shirt designs and stuff like that you can go to. If you go redbubble.com/people and then / again, is one called, I have two sites. One's called Anson's Art Zoo, and the other one's called Bad Juju, BADJOOJOO. And those are my designs and artwork on T-shirts and mugs and bedcloths and shower curtains and stuff like that. But it's all my work. If you like looking at artwork, it's just like looking at a portfolio gallery if you want. But so those are different ways of
wait. So you didn't get the domain name AnsonJew.com?
I used to have that. That's another story. I used to have AnsonJew.com. I lost that somehow, and I haven't gotten it back yet. But I'm kind of in between websites right now. So when I get my new website up, it will. If I can get AnsonJew.com back, I will use that, or I will use something similar. It's a weird way the story works. I can't even have my own domain anymore.
Eric Wilmunder also lost his. He had wilmunder.com, and now he does.
It's like, how many people are named Wilmunder? How many people are named Anson Jew? I mean, it's just crazy.
Well, once you get that domain name, if it expires and you don't renew it, then someone takes it.
That's what happened to me.
Sells it to you for $1 million.
It's like I have to buy my own name back from some company in China or something.
And one last question for me. What are your plans for the near future, and how, you've stated how people can stay in touch with you and your work with all the websites that you mentioned.
Well, right now, like I said, work is in production is kind of at a halt right now. So in the film industry, so I'm going to push a little harder finding work in other areas. So I'm looking at trying to get more game work, publishing work. I worked on a graphic novel a while ago. That didn't get published, but I do have samples of that work up. But I would want to. I'm going to see if I can find an agent and try to get more work in the publishing industry, or maybe more work in design. But for the next year and a half, I have a feeling it's going to be very rough going. So I want to make sure that I keep myself covered. So in the meantime, I'm putting up T-shirt designs, and I've got my own personal projects that I'm working on.
And I see that you post storyboards on Twitter and on LinkedIn, which are
Twitter,
super awesome.
You go to Twitter or Instagram and look for Anson Art or Anson Jew Art, and you can find my storyboards that I've been posting. I think the next bunch of stuff is going to be a lot of my concept artwork. So I've been printing I've been publishing a lot of storyboards and comics work on Instagram. So yeah, make sure you check that out. And my contact information is on all those sites. I'm on a lot of social media. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn and stuff like that. So you can find me and contact me. It's probably not very hard to find.
Well, I hope the strike will end soon.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah. So, and like I said before, you can always get to my website, ansonart.tripod.com/landing, and that takes you to a face page that gets you to my Flickr site, which has tons of stuff on it, tons of artwork.
Tons of cool stuff, may I add. Well, thank you so much, Anson. It's been super fun chatting with you today.
Thanks for talking with me.